And we are now live. Thank you so much for participating.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rupert Hammond-Chambers. I am president of the US-Taiwan Business Council, a non-profit trade association based in the greater Washington, D.C. area, committed to promoting bilateral relations between the United States and Taiwan. We have a fantastic, in my view, lineup of speakers today to talk about a truly critical area for personal health and welfare, and of course, the welfare of our countries and on our world. No more so relevant than in this period of pandemic. It's not unprecedented because the world has had pandemics before, but for most of us in our lifetime, this is certainly a first experience. And we're all trying to grapple with it. We're trying to grapple with it at a personal level, at a family level, and a friend's level, what it means for our own personal space and our relationships. And of course, at a societal and global level, there are myriad challenges, all layered one above the other, or one on top of the other. And this is creating real challenges for the world, but it also opportunities to learn, opportunities to better prepare our countries, our homes, and our lives for future health challenges, and also to look for ways to better cooperate in our societies, as well as in country-to-country relations. Taiwan, as many of our viewers and listeners may know, has done a superb job relative to the rest of the world, but in its own right, in managing the COVID pandemic. And it has received global recognition for that right out of the bat, with extremely low rates of people with COVID, and of course, blessedly, a very low rate of death from the pandemic. And I personally feel we have much to learn from Taiwan, and also, hopefully, in the future, areas in which we might cooperate with the country in promoting better healthcare practices, better solutions, better treatments, and a whole range of other things that, as yet, we have not realized. I'm going to hand us over now to Joe Damond. Joe is the EVP for International Affairs at BIO, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. He's responsible for developing and implementing the Industry Association's program of international advocacy and outreach, including the areas of trade policy and foreign government affairs. Joe is a perfect moderator and manager for this morning's session, and I'm going to pass it over to him now. Joe, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Rupert. I'm really pleased to be here this morning and be here on with such esteemed panelists. I think we're going to have an interesting discussion of this. I thought I would do a couple things just to set the scene. I think these issues with respect to healthcare and the healthcare systems, the life sciences sector, relate strongly to both the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. They relate importantly to Taiwan's economic strategy, and importantly, they relate to healthcare, as Rupert was pointing out, to the well-being of patients, both in Taiwan and in the U.S., and indeed around the world, as we begin to collaborate on solutions together. Interestingly, in the time I've followed these issues, I've found that healthcare issues, somewhat surprisingly, have been very important in U.S.-Taiwan trade relations for many years. My own experience, some of you know, is that I worked at the U.S. Trade Representative's Office for about 12 years, and I worked on APEC and Southeast Asian issues. By the way, I met President Tsai during that time because she was also an APEC official from Taiwan. I was an APEC official from the U.S. That was before she was in politics. But even then, this was back over 20 years ago, like these kinds of healthcare issues were still part of the bilateral discussions between the U.S. and Taiwan. And then in the 20 years since, I've been in the healthcare sector, life sciences sector, working on Asia from this perspective, and they've always been part of the discussion, an important part of the discussion between U.S. and Taiwan. And I would just want to point out, in two ways, that these issues have been important in the bilateral relationship. One is that they have been a source, again, maybe surprisingly, of some tension in the bilateral relationship. We're going to get more into that as we have this discussion. Both with respect to certain intellectual property rights issues, U.S. companies wanting stronger protection in Taiwan, and then you have a established Taiwanese generics pharmaceutical sector that wanted less IP protection, let's say. And then secondly, a lot of issues related to market access in Taiwan for healthcare products, especially as Taiwan's economy has developed and it's become a wealthier economy. It's been viewed as being a more important market for the latest and greatest life sciences technologies, and to the benefit of its own patients. But there have been issues surrounding that. Some of it, I think, goes to the root cause. It's pointed out in the study here that Taiwan spends significantly amount less on its healthcare system than most other countries now at its level of development, which is about 6% of GDP. And so there, of course, it's because of that, it's having to make choices about what healthcare products it can procure and get to its patients. We'll get more into that. I would note that some progress has been made, particularly last year on the IP side, that Taiwan passed some reforms in the rather arcane area of patent linkage, but that has not gone unnoticed by our sector, biotech sector, and by the pharmaceutical sector. That this has increased Taiwan's attractiveness as a place in which to do research and development and innovation. So there's been this tension. On the other hand, what I've seen also is there are increasing opportunities for collaboration and mutual learning. Rupert pointed out one of those areas, obviously in the area of COVID, where Taiwan is really truly a global model and has done much better, I must admit, than the US in terms of curbing COVID spread. And there's a lot of lessons there to be learned, but also maybe more directly to this discussion in the area of life sciences technologies. My organization, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, actually has a partnership with its counterpart in Taiwan, Taiwan Bio, and we have collectively hosted a meeting there for the last 3 years called Bio-Taiwan, where we bring together biotech innovators from Taiwan and the US and from around the world, in fact, to talk about doing partnerships and building on Taiwan's already strong technological base. And I think we're also heartened by the fact that President Tsai has made this sector, biotech or life sciences, and particularly the biotech parts of it, a priority for her in Taiwan's economic development. And what we see promising about that is there seems to be a shift toward an innovative biotech and biopharma sector and other aspects of healthcare, as opposed to simply treating the rather old-fashioned, if I might say, or legacy pharmaceutical sector, which was not based on technology, but on really more on imitation of technologies that were developed elsewhere. And this is kind of a sea change, if Taiwan, and it's important for Taiwan. I think in economy at Taiwan's level of development, you really need to make your economic strategy based on innovation. I'm not saying anything that she didn't know, that President Tsai hasn't already made a priority. I finally just want to say, I know Mark is going to talk, Dr. Cao is going to talk about this in a minute, but one word about a bilateral trade agreement, because this issue has come up in that context again, and we'll have more discussion about this. Being a former trade negotiator myself and having negotiated bilateral trade agreements, I would just say that it's clearly on the agenda. It's something that Taiwan is very interested in and wants to get the US more interested in, especially the new administration. I would say my advice would be the best way for Taiwan to do that, and clearly there are going to be some geopolitical issues involved here, but the best way from a trade perspective to do that is to push for a state-of-the-art, high standard agreement with the US, make it a model agreement. because that way it has value to the US, not just simply in terms of US-Taiwan trade, but as a model for the rest of the Asia Pacific region. That would be very interesting, I think, for the United States, if it were viewed as that sort of agreement. But I think I recognize bilateral trade agreements, especially with the US, can be hard to negotiate. So we'll get into those issues a little bit more. What I'd like to do now, without any further delay, is to turn it over for presentations by our two speakers and get their perspectives on these issues, and they'll probably add several issues as well. And then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion of that, and we'll open up the chat room for questions for any of us speakers as well. So the speaker who's going first is Dr. Mark Cao, president of Taiwanese American Association of Biotechnology. Dr. Cao, you might want to introduce yourself a little bit more as well, but I'll turn the floor over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I'm a toxicologist. I used to work in the research centers like NIH and also Cornell University. Then I worked for the industry at the Bayer, American Sailame, Wyeth, and finally landed on Johnson & Johnson. So my past experience are for the most part in the pharmaceutical drug development. And also I got involved with several bioterrorism projects with NIH, in which we develop countermeasures for anthrax and plague. So I am very interested in talking about this area as well in today's presentation. So I would like to start my presentation. Let's see. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I cannot. Okay. Okay, so let me start with the slide number 1. Can you see the slide number 1?
We see the first slide from you, yes.
Okay, so what I want to say is thank you for the invitation for today's discussion. Secondly, I want to say that I want to emphasize that I am not representing any government or private entities for my presentation today. This is strictly my own experience working with industry and the Taiwan government and some nonprofit organizations in the United States. So the first, I want to talk about my thoughts about this bilateral trade agreement and its impact on collaboration and in healthcare in Taiwan. See, the current Taiwan government is very strongly behind US-Taiwan BDA, and this can be seen from recently approval of beef and pork import to Taiwan. And it takes a lot of political capitals for President Tsai to do that, but they are willing to spend their political capitals to make it happen. So they understand that this could increase the two-way trade and investment and strengthen ties with the United States. And this could also help Taiwan diversify away from China. I think this is main concern for the current DPP government. Taiwan has 40% of the trade with China, and that's too heavy. And that I think Taiwan wanted to diversify away from China to the EU or US and Southeast Asia. And this, additionally, I think one more point is, as Joe had mentioned earlier, this could provide a pathway for other countries to pursue similar agreements with Taiwan. I was in DC many years, and I had some discussion with the embassies in DC area, and the European and Japanese always told me that they are too small. They are small countries. They cannot fight China, but if the US can lead the way, they would follow. And I think this could set as a good example to do that. But there are potential issues for the Taiwan government. One of that is traditional support for DPP. As I mentioned earlier, the pork import has cost a lot of political capitals for DPP, and how are they going to manage that? That's an additional concern for them in terms of the bilateral trade agreement on the pharmaceutical area, which could be even bigger than a pork issue. There might be impact on the local industry, of course, and also pushback from the consumers. So this, they have to manage it, and I think they have to decide, is the BDA more important than the political capitals they have to spend out? And I think that's the last thing that I was more concerned about, is will Biden administration support a US-Taiwan BDA? Traditionally, Democrats are not in favor of BTA with other countries. So there are some issues about Taiwan sales policies. I think it's clearly indicated in the report. Of course, we know that this is mostly associated with cost containment and the protection of local industry. The cost containment is actually planned from the welfare perspective. But I think the government also realized that this will sacrifice innovation. And if the Thai administration think innovation is critically important, they do have to consider raise their spending on the healthcare from like 6.1% GDP to probably about the same as UK, 8%, maybe not as high as the US, 17%. But that's something the government has to decide what to do with it. In terms of regulatory issues, I think there are several areas that can be improved. This long approval timeline, the product and clinical trials take long time for the Taiwan government to approve. So this is an area that I mentioned this quite a few times to Minister Chen in the past, but I think they are working on it, but I have not seen a lot of progress in the area. And there are also necessary requirements and documentation for medical devices. And this is hard to do, but I think through negotiation between governments, this could happen, could be improved. And also there are different level of playing fields for EU and the US. I think this all can be improved. And there are progress been made in the past through negotiation and consumer advocacy. For example, US pork import is one example. And the advocacy for not requiring animal testing for food safety is also another example. Now, is bilateral trade agreement negotiation going to help this? I would think so, but we'll see what happens next. Now, the potential business ties between US and Taiwan are several areas. I think the most important thing is that the Taiwan has very strong remote healthcare potential because Taiwan has excellent ICT technology and hardware, but it's very weak in the software. So this can be collaborated with the international communities. The pharmaceutical area, Taiwan has excellent manufacturing standards, but lack of innovation. And this can be helped by the international companies. In terms of medical device, Taiwan has ICT industry as the backbone, but lack of innovation and also lack of understanding of international regulatory requirements. And the other thing I think is very important is that the information for the Taiwan or US company to find the potential collaborators in each country. That's something that's missing. At least it's not very well known in terms of what to do. The other potential future business ties are strategic area. For example, strategic supply chain. As we know that in the last several years, there were concerns about the manufacturing and the supply of the medical drugs and devices. And especially majority of the API now are produced by China, India. So this need to be diversified, and Taiwan can help. Taiwan has good manufacturing standards, and it has raw material. It has done raw material and life-saving drugs manufacturing. For example, in the case of Daxo, when there was a global shortage, the Taiwanese company Dongyang actually started producing the drug for the Johnson & Johnson, and which helped relieve the global pressure on that particular issue. And also there are like certain drugs now, we have a lot of contamination from the manufacturing from either both China and India. And this Taiwan's high manufacturing standard can help to produce these life-saving drugs. And also there are like personal protection equipments that can be produced in Taiwan. Taiwan has done a lot of that in the past year to help relieve this COVID pandemic. And that area, including mask, gloves, and respirator, and many others that they can do very quickly. And the other area that could be of future tie is the strategic national stockpile. This is probably something of my personal interest more than the others, but I know that there are strategic national stockpile in the US, and this is for preventing any kind of bioterrorism attack. So Taiwan's industry can really help to stockpile for emergency use of like personal protection equipment, antibiotics for anthrax countermeasures. This is the two drugs I work on with NIH to get approval for the use as the anthrax countermeasure. And also there are antivirals and vaccines that can be used for flu pandemics. Taiwan that has the capability to do this, and that we should have more business tie in this area. So the future business tie really between US and Taiwan is important. It's not just economical, but also strategic. The BDA could be foster more international collaboration and through the negotiation. And BDA could also potentially remove any regulatory and pricing issues in Taiwan. So I'm going to end my presentation over here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cow. I look forward to discussing this in more detail afterwards. Now I'd like to turn it over to our second speaker, Christina Lin, who is the Taiwan Country Manager for Varian Medical. Christina, welcome to the panel, and introduce yourself and make your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm not a Native American, so please bear my English pronunciations. And I study in the mass communications. However, I spent past 20 years on the radiation therapy treatment equipment, sales and marketing area. And now it's my honor to be part of the launch of this report and share with you Varian Medical System's vision and suggestions on Taiwan's healthcare policies and US-Taiwan relations toward the new digital healthcare area. And Varian Medical System is a Palo Alto, California-based oncology solution company with a deep specialization in radiation therapy equipment, software and services for cancer management and treatments. And at Varian, we are committed to achieving our vision of a world without fear of cancer. We see a future of cancer care where certain tumors can be managed or eradicated by harnessing emerging treatments and technologies. And Varian has been in Taiwan since 1979 and has been working with hospitals, universities, and the Ministry of Health and Welfare to support treatments and cancer patients. So we supply half of the radiotherapy market in Taiwan, including proton machines for National Taiwan University Cancer Center and China Medical University Hospital. During the challenging time of COVID-19, our technology ensures that the patients in remote areas get a whole of care approach by bringing technology and people and data together. And we maintain over 8,000 treatment units worldwide to serve patients. And through using the latest Smart Connect technology, our support team can have a 360-degree virtual view of our machines remotely to ensure minimum disparitions of cancer patient treatments. So we are also supported remote access. Our variant has also supported remote access to our treatment planning system, enable a portion of the hospital workforces to plan patient treatments remotely from home during the lockdown due to COVID-19 all over the world. So at Varian, we currently have the ability to integrate all our software and patient insights in the cloud, so caregivers anywhere in the world can access the latest information and deliver the more accurate treatments. And our technology platform bring different teams together from surgical, medical radiation, and interventional oncology, resulting in a team approach that offers the best care of each patient. So in Taiwan, we have enabled remote collaborations between Taidong Christian Hospital, Taidong 马偕医院, and Sangyao Cancer Center, 和信致癌中心, through private cloud technology. So the senior medical physicists in Taipei can remotely support the treatment planning process in Taidong, where resources and staffing are limited. And this project is just a start. We are committed to continue advancing telemedicine service in remote area in Taiwan, including through the establishment of a pilot program of remote radiotherapy departments where treatment can be delivered with a limited on-site staff and strong support from a leading partner in the urban centers such as Taipei. And this project will serve as a platform and the standard for medical tourism in the future that could be expanded outside of Taiwan, echoing President Tsai's new southbound policy. So what we see is that the pandemic has accelerated the speed of innovations in digital healthcare. Therefore, improvement of Taiwan's current regulation to relax restrictions on remote medical care is critical to Taiwan's digital healthcare environment and industry. And the shortage of clinicians to serve growing patients all over the world is a major challenge. Now, technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics has been shown to improve the early detection of cancer by accurately identifying at-risk patients and making diagnostic tests more precise. And it would also have an enormous impact in improving the cost effectiveness of clinical trials and research by reducing the time to complete the trial through improving the quality and the utility of the data gathered. And Taiwan is at the forefront of introducing of those advanced cancer care solutions and holds a tremendous potential to serve as a model for the world in providing highly integrated and patient-centered cancer care. So we are really excited to see the Taiwan government places high importance on the development and application of advancing technologies such as AI, IoT, big data, and 5G in the economy. The US TBC white paper outlines the importance of US-Taiwan collaborations in this area and the potential impact of combining each market's respective strengths to secure new innovations. We are excited about these prospects. And for Varian, one of the most critical aspects of securing our vision of a world without fear of cancer revolves around the use of data, AI, and cloud solutions to improve efficiencies and effectiveness of cancer treatments. And cybersecurity is also a critical focus for us. to protect the integrity of sensitive patient information. And we continually invest in robust security program and collaborate with our partners across the healthcare and the tech space to ensure patient information remains secure. And AI-assisted cancer treatment can help hospitals reduce the cost and human efforts spent on examinations and treatment planning. And we believe the transitions to AI-assisted medical system is integral to the evolution of the biomedical industry and necessary for Taiwan to face the public health challenge ahead. We have recently introduced the first in the world AI-assisted cancer treatment system in Taiwan. And as those solutions become more ready available in Taiwan, we strongly recommend that the Taiwanese government carefully study the interdependence between the smart healthcare and Taiwan regulations. The economic prosperity networks jump-started U.S.-Taiwan trade and investment integration process, and representatives on both sides are in constant dialogue to harmonize many trade and regulatory differences. And the issue of data protection, cybersecurity, and privacy are prominent in those dialogue. And we think these discussions, one glaring topic to focus is the use of medical data. And we find that unlike the U.S. HIPAA Act in 1996 and the High-Tech Act, Taiwan is lacking in legislating clear regulation statutes to pave the way for a safe and a prosperous environment for private companies to acquire and utilize medical data to develop innovative medical goods and services. And the lack of a clear regulation also hinders American companies to provide their medical AI and digital service to Taiwanese patients and doctors. And also, another area that we would like to mention is to improve the adoption of innovative drugs and medical technology on the Taiwan reimbursement system. The sustainability of the healthcare system is prominent, but it should be balanced with the introduction of advanced healthcare solutions. And we are happy to see that Taiwan is increasing its NHI budget for innovative new drugs. And this is an important step. We see the President Tsai's biotech strategy includes precision medicine. The variant is right here with her to provide Taiwan with AI-assisted cancer treatments and data-driven improvements to support the patient well-being. And just like the white paper outlines, we suggest the Taiwanese government should also reevaluate its reimbursement scheme to reflect the cost of new healthcare innovations that goes into enhancing the treatment of the patients. And we have been pleased to see increasing collaborations between the U.S. and Taiwan on 21st century trade issue, and believe the U.S. TBC white paper outlined the most important healthcare issues for our government to address and to ensure patients have access to the most advanced medical care. So, as the white paper points out, Taiwan actually has both an amazing medical sector and a strong ICT industry that perfectly situate Taiwan to grow medical AI and medical data services. So we believe through close collaborations between the U.S. and Taiwan government to share best practice regarding the medical data usage will help both U.S. companies to bring their services to the Taiwanese market, as well as to help Taiwanese companies to develop and innovate their products and service on a level and standard that is comparable to and compatible with the global market. And thank you for listening. That is my short presentation to you.
Okay, Thank you, Christina. What we would like to do now is open up the chat room for people to ask questions of any of us panelists. While people are thinking about what questions they might want to ask, I think I'll start by asking both of you. I think you've both addressed this question, but let's try to boil it down. I think we're all saying that there are great opportunities for Taiwan to become more of a world leader in life sciences technology, the way it has already in IT technology. And in fact, there's increasing connection between IT technologies and life sciences technology. So what lessons do you think that Taiwan government can learn from its success in IT technology and apply to become even more innovative in life sciences sector? If you were giving advice to the president, what would you say the most important thing that Taiwan needs to do to become more innovative and to become not just strong, they are strong in many cases, but actually a world leader? Because the markets, I think Taiwan is very conscious of the fact that the markets outside of Taiwan are more important. They're much bigger. So please who wants to start this question to say what advice would you give to Taiwan to become a world leader in life sciences technology?
Maybe I start. Well, this has been the issue for our organization. We went to Taiwan a couple of times, and this has always been the issue that we address to the Taiwan government regarding. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure
Okay.
Taiwan can become the Asia Swiss. I mean, if you look at the Swiss industry, pharmaceutical industry, they are very strong, but the country is very small. The government has a lot of policies to help the industry to grow. For example, manufacturing pharmaceuticals in Swiss is tax-free. I mean, very low tax. So that's something that the government can help. The Taiwan industry has has issues like they are all very small scale, and the merger is a necessity to make it innovative, because with such a small scale of pharmaceutical companies, you cannot have very good innovative products. It's not sustainable. And also the government policy for investment was at some point they had this, like you need to invest. You cannot withdraw your capital if the company is not making money for many years. This is not a good policy, because people would not invest in the pharma industry. So from many area, like I mentioned before, there is potential for Taiwan to grow, but it has to be from the internal modification of the pharmaceutical industry, and the increased collaboration with its external partners. For example, there is the collaboration between Janssen Pharmaceutical and E3. Their research budget collaboration has increased fourfold to $4 million this year. And this is kind of collaboration I think it should be encouraged by the government more and more, so that more innovation ideas and the collaboration can go into Taiwan for the industry.
Okay, thank you. Christina, did you want to speak to that too?
Yeah, I think that Taiwan actually have a better chance in the AI and a new digital area, the medical care innovations. However, the lack of the regulations to the hospitals freely use the data on the cloud, and to ease the concerns on the hospitals that to using the public cloud area to store their patient information is a very important area that if we wanted to let the whole medical innovations surrounding by the new technology such as AI and big data innovations that grows. So that is very important. And I do see that Taiwan actually has a very good clinical professionals and a very good patient-centered care. So I see a lot of hospitals actually have particular doctors doing a research on the AI area in the small pieces and trying to figure out how he can use this small innovations become a product and sell to the across the world. So I think that the collaborations between the vendors, universities and hospitals, the alliance will help a lot in the future. And the AI and the new digital care basically is localized products. So a lot of innovations that can be carried out locally. So this is really a good chance. And to produce a platform or applications surrounding the healthcare basically is much easier innovations rather than produce a drug. The cost of that is also much less. But just like I say, to actually release the restrictions for future collaboration and future development is very important. And just like I mentioned in the presentations, the whole telemedicine development actually was prohibited in Taiwan because our doctors cannot actually prescriptions remotely. Suppose remote areas and in particular sites that they think is remote. So the whole regulation needs to be changed fast to let the technology grow. Otherwise, it will be limited.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I add a couple more points?
Please.
Yeah. Taiwan's ICT industry actually grow from the research laboratory, E3. I think the Taiwan government is trying to use the same approach to develop the healthcare industry. And so far, it's not very successful because I think eventually it has to be led by private industry, not the government. And currently, there's no big enough company want to take on the healthcare issues. So it's very fragmented, and there's a lot of lack of progress. In terms of ICT technology used in healthcare, Taiwan has very good technology, hardware, but software is very lacking. And also the developers in Taiwan are only thinking about local market, and they don't know the international regulation. I think this is an area can be helped by the United States.
Thank you. I have a couple of, those are great comments. I would just make my own reaction to those comments, and then we'll go to some of the questions that are coming in. First of all, I just want to highlight, building on what Christina said, this is something we're looking at BIO, that cross-border flows of data in the life sciences sector have become, and just data in the healthcare sector have just become increasingly important over just the last several years. I don't think people realize how important this healthcare data, it's not just clinical trial data, but other healthcare data is important to the development. It's become so central to the development of new technologies. And however, we're starting to see governments around the world struggle with policy in this area. The EU has put restrictions on flows of data, which is going to impede collaboration. China itself passed or considered a biosecurity law last year, which could restrict the flow of life sciences information across borders. If Taiwan is able to get this right and get the data flows issue right, there's a real competitive advantage there, because China's always going to be more restrictive on data exchange, let's face it. There's a competitive opportunity there. Of course, privacy needs to be respected, but everybody agrees on that, and there are ways of doing that. So we need to also assure patients that their anonymity, that their privacy will be protected in the use of this data. I just wanted to say, though, it's become an increasingly important issue. Secondly, with respect to Dr. Kai, what you said about using the ITRI model, that resonates with me too, because this sector is just very different. It's very risky sector, and governments can do various things to seed early stage research and development. But when it really comes to developing new products, you need access to private sector capital when it comes to clinical trials. And therefore, you have to go to private markets, because 90% of the clinical trials on the drug side fail. So governments aren't going to want to support a project where 90% failure rate. They need to that's too much risk. They need to get private sector capital. And so this sector, unlike a lot of other sectors, my experience has been looking globally, has been much more characterized by collaboration. You take different parties who are sharing the risk and who are bringing different things into the development of new products. And therefore, a smaller country like Taiwan certainly can't do it by itself. It needs to build these collaborations and across borders with the United States, with Europe, elsewhere. Otherwise, it's not going to be like there's going to be one big Taiwanese company. It's as in the semiconductor areas, that can go globally. You're going to have to be part of a network. I think that's the way it's working globally.
Yep.
So those are my thoughts. I wanted to go through some of the questions that we've got, and I need to start. I'll start with a quick response. There's a question from our host, Rupert, to ask me about me, and I'll go. There's questions for both Mark and Christina after this. In my experience as a trade negotiator, can I break down a little bit more how healthcare fits into these trade agreements? Well, it's a great question. Let me say that the 2 bilateral trade agreements that the U.S. has concluded in the last 10 or 15 years, one with Australia in the Asia Pacific area, one with Australia, one with Korea, both had provisions on life sciences sector. Now this falls into 2 areas. One is in the intellectual property rights sector, of course, strong IP, because this, as I said, this sector is so risky. You've got to be able to have some intellectual property protection or nobody will invest in it. And the second area had to do with market access and protecting and promoting innovation in the life sciences sector. And it's worthwhile, particularly looking at the Korean agreement for Taiwan. That was a few years ago now, but it's not a bad place to start, recognizing that healthcare can be a controversial area. But I think what the U.S. generally has sought to do was to find win-win solutions, because it's better for patients if there's more access to technology, as the panelists have pointed out. It's better for the economy if there's more innovation in both countries, and it's better for trade. So I think that now we're in the 21st later, this would be, if this is a new state-of-the-art agreement, so much has changed. And by the way, one thing that increasingly is part of these trade agreements is also data and the flow of data across borders. And I think life sciences needs to be taken account. It really hasn't in the past, but it's become such an important issue. So let's go on to that's the question that Rupert asked for me, but let's go on to some of the other questions. Maybe this is something you've both Mark and Christina have addressed, but I'll raise it also from Rupert. Does the Taiwan government have the experience it needs to internationalize and in this sector? And are there international organizations that Taiwan participation in could help improve the domestic market policy and environment? Any thoughts on that?
You mean to join the international organization?
Well, it could be a formal international organization, I suppose, or more informal international organizations of businesses, or any way. I mean, and I think the broader question is just how. Maybe we've discussed this a little bit. What would make it how would you advise Taiwan's, this is a tough one, international strategy? I mean, to be successful in this, and I don't mean geopolitically, let's just focus on the sector. That's too hard a question. We don't want to get into, but just even in terms of, you know, I think we talked a little bit, I just talked about the importance of collaboration. I mean, if you're going to go global in the healthcare sector, life sciences sector, you need to have good, important collaborators. That's one thing. I just wonder if you have any other thoughts about how to turn its local strengths in IT and in life sciences and very good healthcare sector, how you can turn local strengths into global strengths.
Let me go first. I think for Taiwan to join international organization or any kind of group with Chinese presence, it's going to be difficult. So Taiwan government need to find the area where whatever Taiwan wants to advance will not be interfered by Chinese government. So that's the area they need to figure out, the niche area. And well, the other thing is that the trade agreements with other countries without involvement of China will be very critical. I think, you know, with trade agreements with US will set a path for another country to do the similar pathway. And during the trade negotiation, anything can happen, and it will benefit both countries or whatever countries involved in the negotiation. That's my thought.
Okay, so I'd like to share our point of view. Actually, the Thai government is launching a southbound policy in the medical sector. And basically, they have identified several hospitals that take care of one country and to actually share their clinical expertise. And by doing so, we figure out that most of the hospital at current stage, they will kind of like send a group to a certain country and have connections with certain hospitals and do the educational share. But because of the pandemic, everything stops because no one can fly all over the world. And also that Taiwan actually is in a very interesting area that we have the most and the most proper, the most proton centers in Taiwan in the world. Actually, we have the government issued a 10 license of the proton gantries, which is far more than the other countries in the world. And all those hospitals are eager to get patients from outside of Taiwan. So I think that this is where the area that technology can help. Because if you can actually have an alliance between the Taiwan's medical systems and healthcare providers, and to support and help the other regions where they are lacking after medical professionals or they need help, then you can provide medical services. And also that can bring the local manufacturer on the medical devices to the hospitals, like the blood pressure measurements devices, etc. And also that the whole digital and smart hospital care is building surrounding the hospital information systems. And I think that if we can have such kind of the networks to let Taiwan hospital to support the other countries' hospitals, then you can easily actually start to grow those digital industry all over the world.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and of course, for the big medical devices, is almost very challenging for the Taiwan vendors to actually produce. But for the small devices that actually are surrounding on the remote diagnostic and all those AI medical devices, that actually is something we can do.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to turn to another issue that's become really a big global issue, and which Dr. Kao mentioned, which is supply chains. And this, I think you both might have something to say about this. With the COVID crisis, I think clearly many countries around the world, including the United States, are talking more about diversifying their supply chains for healthcare products, medicines and other healthcare products, because if you're too dependent on one source, then it could be a problem in a pandemic. Now, I just give my position for my own organization. We think it would be a bad idea if everybody simply closed their borders and tried to produce everything locally. That's not going to work, especially for smaller countries. But it does make some sense to have a more diverse supply chain so that it's more flexible in times of crisis as we face this year. And Mark, you mentioned this earlier, so there's a big demand for this right now, and to diversify supply chains, especially from some of the bigger economies in Taiwan's neighborhood. And does the government of Taiwan have a strategy for working with other countries to help them diversify their this is a big trade opportunity for Taiwan, to help them diversify their sources of life sciences products? Or should they? If they don't have a strategy, would you give advice on that?
Yeah, I think they have strategy on that. It's not clear to me what they want to do. They do have a white paper. I just read them. They did mention about that. And also, as you know, FDA has put it as a strategic importance to diversify all the pharmaceutical manufacturing because of the issues with several drugs in the last couple of years. And this is an issue for opportunity for Taiwan. But the problem with Taiwan is that the scale is too small. It's not big enough to supply the international, huge international needs. So what I think the strategy, I think they understand is that they will have to increase the scale of manufacturing, and they have to negotiate with the countries who wish to have a different supply of the pharmaceutical or API ingredients. So that I think their strategy, and I'm sure Alex Azar visited Taiwan last year. They talk about this. I don't know the detail of it, but I think this MOU has included this supply chain issue.
Okay. All right. Christina, do you have anything to add or no? All right. It looks like we're almost at time. So Rupert, I'd like to turn it back to you for closing remarks. And I'd like to thank the panelists for an interesting discussion, which we could have carried on for much longer, but that's the nature of these webinars. So thanks very much. I really enjoyed it. And back to you, Rupert.
Joe, thank you so very much indeed. Your ability to manage these sessions is just excellent. Thank you so much for your time this morning. To Mark and Christine, thank you for your expertise and your insights, all the time and effort that you took to prepare. I think that was a really interesting session. And to Joe's point, I think there's a great deal more here that we can still dig into in the future. Obviously, the council has just released its white paper on this issue related to US-Taiwan. We were going to continue to develop these threads as they evolve, and surely they will. I particularly liked Joe focusing in on how trade agreements will fit here. Obviously, we've got traditional trade agreements like the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement that Taiwan has with the US, a modest platform for sure, aspirationally a bilateral trade agreement that, in our hope, would capture a much bigger piece of both the challenges and the opportunities. And we also have, just recently, we have the release last autumn, the launch, thank you, that's a better word, last autumn of the EPPD, the Economic Prosperity Partnership Dialogue between the United States and Taiwan, an important new platform which will have several areas of focus initially. Semiconductors is obviously getting a lot of play at the moment due to some tight supply constraints. But healthcare is also a significant priority for this new platform. And we're looking to, as an organization and as part of the community, to work with Mr. Biden's government and President Tsai's government in pursuit of areas of cooperation utilizing the EPPD and its new platform. Our recent white paper is on the website. Do please download it and have a read. I think it's a really well-framed look at where things stand right now and some sort of forward-projected analysis. And most importantly, as a trade association, I want to thank all of our members and those of you who tune in and support the work of the US-Taiwan Business Council and are willing to commit your time and your effort in promoting such an important relationship between the United States and Taiwan, two countries absolutely committed to that relationship and the welfare of its people. I look forward to seeing you at our next event, which will be in a few weeks, and we'll be focusing in on energy opportunities and challenges in the US-Taiwan relationship. So again, I wish you all good evening. I wish you all good day. And to our wonderful speakers, Joe and Mark and Christine, thank you again for your time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.